The rain hammered against the palace windows like 1,000 angry fists. Inside the grand corridor, Officer James Harding stood at attention. His back straight as an iron rod, his face revealing nothing. But inside, his heart was breaking. He had been watching her all morning. Princess Catherine. She walked past him 3 times, her eyes red and swollen, her shoulders carrying a weight no young woman should bear. Each time, she tried to smile at the staff. Each time, that smile crumbled before it could fully form. James knew what had happened. Everyone in the palace knew. The news had broken just 2 days ago. The princess had lost someone very dear to her. Someone who had been her strength, her guide, her shelter from the storms of royal life, and now she was drowning in grief while the world watched her every move. The protocol was clear. Guards do not speak unless spoken to. Guards do not show emotion. Guards do not interfere with royal routines. James had followed these rules for 7 years without question. 7 years of standing like a statue while life happened around him. But today felt different. Today, he watched the princess pause at a portrait in the hallway. Her hand reached up, trembling, almost touching the frame. Then she pulled it back. Her breath caught in her throat. James could see her fighting the tears. Fighting to maintain the composure everyone expected from her. If you're moved by this story, please subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, true stories that touch the heart and remind us of our shared humanity. Now, back to what happened next. James had been assigned to the East Wing for the entire week. It was meant to be an honor. The East Wing was where the royal family spent their private time. Away from cameras and diplomats and the crushing weight of public duty. But for James, this week had become torture. He was watching someone suffer. He could do nothing. The palace rules were not suggestions. They were absolute. Break them, and you lose everything. Your position, your career, your reputation. James had worked his whole life to wear this uniform. His father had been a guard. His grandfather, too. It was in his blood. But so was something else. Compassion, humanity, the belief that sometimes rules existed to be broken. It was now afternoon. The princess had retreated to the private sitting room. James stood outside the door, as he had for hours. Inside, he could hear silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Then he heard it. A sound so quiet he almost missed it. A sob, just one. Quickly stifled as if she was ashamed of it, James closed his eyes. His hand tightened on his ceremonial sword. Every fiber of his training screamed at him to remain still, to do nothing, to be the perfect soldier, but his heart screamed louder. He thought of his own sister, Emily. 3 years ago, she had lost her husband. James remembered finding her alone in her kitchen at midnight, sitting in the dark, too sad to even cry anymore. He had sat with her, not saying anything, just being there. And she told him later that those silent hours had saved her life. The princess was alone in that room, surrounded by luxury, by paintings worth millions, by staff who would grant her every wish. But completely, utterly alone with her grief, James made a decision. His hand moved to the door handle. He knew what this could cost him. He knew the scandal it could create. A guard entering a royal's private room uninvited? It was unthinkable. But some things matter more than rules. He knocked. 3 soft taps. And then, before he could change his mind, he did something no royal guard had done in 100 years of palace history. He opened the door. The princess sat by the window, her back to him. She didn't turn around. For a moment, James thought she hadn't heard him. Then her voice came, quiet and strained. "I didn't call for anyone. I know, Your Highness." "Hey?" James's voice was gentle. "I apologize for the intrusion." She turned then. Her eyes were shocked, confused. In all her years at the palace, no guard had ever entered her room without permission. It simply didn't happen. "Officer?" She couldn't remember his name. Why would she? He was one of dozens of faces in uniform. "Harding, Your Highness. James Harding stood in the doorway, not daring to step further. I won't stay. I just wanted to give you something. Catherine stared at him. Her face was blotchy from crying. Her perfect hair was coming undone. She looked young and lost, and nothing like the poised princess the cameras always showed. Give me something? She repeated. James reached into his jacket pocket. His hand emerged holding a small, worn photograph. He held it out to her. Slowly, Catherine stood. She moved toward him, her movements uncertain, like she was in a dream. She took the photograph from his hand. It showed a young woman and a little boy at a beach. The woman was laughing, her hair wild in the wind. The boy was maybe 7 years old, grinning at the camera with an ice cream cone in his hand. That's my mother, James said quietly. And me, 23 years ago. It was taken 3 weeks before she died. Catherine's eyes widened. She looked up at him. I'm so sorry. She had cancer, James continued. Fought it for 2 years. Everyone told me to be strong, to be brave, to remember she was in a better place. All those things people say when they don't know what else to say. The princess's fingers tightened on the photograph. She was listening now, really listening. But my Uncle James said he told me something different. He said grief isn't something you get over. It's something you carry. And some days, it's heavy. So heavy you think you can't take another step. And that's okay. A tear rolled down Catherine's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. He told me that crying doesn't make you weak. Pretending you're fine when you're not, that's what breaks you. James's voice was steady, but his eyes held a deep understanding. Your Highness, you don't have to be strong right now. Not here. Not with me. The princess's composure shattered. The walls she had built so carefully over the past 2 days crumbled all at once. She covered her face with her hands, and the sobs came. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. James didn't move toward her. He didn't try to comfort her physically. That would cross another line entirely. Instead, he did something else. He sat down. Right there on the floor, his back against the wall, breaking protocol again. Guards stand. Always. They never sit in the presence of royalty. But James sat. And he waited. Through her tears, Catherine noticed. This soldier, who should be standing rigid and silent, was sitting on her floor like an ordinary person. Like a friend. Slowly, she sank down too. Not on the floor, but into the chair by the window. And she let herself cry. Really cry. The way she hadn't allowed herself to since the news came. Minutes passed. Maybe 10. Maybe 20. James didn't check his watch. He just sat there, a silent presence. Letting her grief fill the room without judgment. When her sobs finally quieted to shaky breaths, Catherine spoke. Her voice was raw. Everyone expects me to smile tomorrow. At the ceremony, they want me to be dignified, composed, perfect. You will be, James said simply. How? The word came out as a plea. How do I stand there and pretend my heart isn't broken? James looked at her with kind eyes. You don't pretend, Your Highness. You stand there with your broken heart. You let people see that you're human, that you love deeply. That's not weakness. That's courage. Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so unprincess-like it made her seem like any other grieving young woman. Who was it? She asked quietly. Who did you lose? James knew she wasn't just asking about his mother anymore. She was asking about the deeper loss, the one that still haunted his eyes. And so he told her. He told her about Emma. Emma was my best friend, James began, his voice distant, traveling back through time. We grew up 3 houses apart. She was the one who dared me to join the Royal Guard in the first place, said I was too serious, that I needed a job where I had to stand still and be quiet. A small, sad smile touched Catherine's lips. The first smile James had seen on her face all day. She was brilliant. Wanted to be a doctor? Was accepted to medical school at 20. She had this laugh that made everyone around her laugh too. You couldn't help it. James's hands rested on his knees. 5 years ago, she was walking home from the library. A drunk driver ran a red light. She died instantly. Oh, God, Catherine whispered. I was on duty when I got the call. Standing right here in this palace. Actually, East Wing, different door. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I wasn't supposed to check it. Protocol, shook his head. But something made me look. It was my father. 3 words. Emma is gone. The room fell silent except for the rain still beating against the windows. I finished my shift, James continued. 6 more hours. I stood at that door and I didn't move. Didn't cry, didn't break. Because that's what I was trained to do. That must have been unbearable, Catherine said softly. It was. But you know what was worse? The 3 months after, everyone expected me to be fine. To move on, get back to normal. And I tried. I smiled. I worked. I pretended. James met her eyes. I pretended so well I almost forgot I was breaking inside. Until one day, I couldn't get out of bed. Just couldn't. My body gave up before my mind did. Catherine leaned forward, listening intently. My father found me. Hadn't seen him cry since my mother's funeral, but he cried that day. And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, son, grief is love with nowhere to go. And love that's strong doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere. So let it out, or it will poison you from the inside. Your father sounds like a wise man, Catherine said. He is. He's also a royal guard. Retired now. 28 years of service. Yes. James paused. He also told me that the bravest thing he ever did in this palace wasn't stopping a security threat or standing in the cold for 12 hours straight. It was the day he asked the Queen Mother if she was okay. Really okay? After the king's death, Catherine's eyes widened. He did that? Broke protocol. Could have been dismissed. But you know what she did? She thanked him. Said it was the first time in weeks anyone had asked her that question, like they actually wanted to hear the answer. The princess looked down at the photograph still in her hands. The smiling woman and the little boy. A moment of joy frozen in time, just weeks before tragedy struck. Can I tell you what I wish someone had told me? James asked gently. Catherine nodded. You don't have to be okay. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not for however long it takes. The people who truly love you won't expect you to be perfect. They'll just want you to be honest. But I'm not just a person, Catherine said, her voice breaking again. I'm a princess. There are expectations, duties. I can't just fall apart. You're a person first, James said firmly. The crown you wear doesn't change the heart that's breaking underneath it. Your Highness, you're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to miss them. You're allowed to not be okay. Tears streamed down Catherine's face again. But this time, she didn't hide them. I keep thinking I see them, she confessed. In hallways. In doorways? I turn around expecting them to be there, and then I remember, and it's like losing them all over again. That will happen for a while, James said quietly. Your mind needs time to accept what your heart knows. Be patient with yourself. They sat in silence again. Outside, the rain began to soften. Inside, something had shifted. The heavy, suffocating grief was still there, but it felt different now. Shared. Less isolating. Why did you do this? Catherine asked suddenly. You could lose your position. Your career? Why risk everything? James considered the question. Then he answered with complete honesty. Because 5 years ago, I needed someone to see me. Really see me. Not as a guard, not as someone who had to be strong, but as a person who was drowning. And someone did, my father. He saved my life that day. James stood up slowly. Today I saw you drowning, and I couldn't walk away. Some things are worth the risk. Catherine stood as well. She walked over to him, still holding the photograph. For a moment, she just looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as a guard in uniform, but as a human being who had extended a hand into her darkness. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to properly thank you for this. You just did. James gave a small, respectful nod. And Your Highness, keep the photo. If you'd like, Sometimes it helps to remember that other people have walked through the fire and survived. You will too. She clutched the photograph to her chest. I'll treasure it. James turned to leave, knowing he had already stayed far longer than he should have. His hand reached for the door handle when her voice stopped him. James. It was the first time she had used his first name. The intimacy of it hung in the air between them. Yes, Your Highness. Tomorrow. At the ceremony. Will you be there? I'm assigned to the south gate, actually. Not the ceremony hall. Catherine's face fell slightly. Then she straightened her shoulders, and for a moment, James saw the princess everyone else saw. Strong, determined, royal. I'll speak to the captain. I want you inside. I want to see at least one face in that room, who knows? Who understands? James wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her that changing guard assignments would raise questions. But he saw what this meant to her. A lifeline in the storm, as you wish, Your Highness. After he left, Catherine sat back down by the window. The rain had stopped completely now. A weak sun was trying to break through the clouds. She looked at the photograph in her hands. A mother and son. A moment of joy before grief. A reminder that happiness and sorrow lived side by side. That one didn't erase the other, for the first time in 2 days. She felt like she could breathe. That evening, Captain Morrison stood in his office, staring at the scheduled change request. His face was a mask of confusion and concern. She specifically requested Officer Harding. For the ceremony. He looked at his second-in-command, Lieutenant Peters. Why? What's the connection? No idea, sir. But the request came directly from Her Highness. Through her private secretary. Morrison rubbed his temples. In his 20 years as captain of the Royal Guard, he had never received such a request. Royals didn't notice individual guards. They weren't supposed to. That was the point. Has Harding done something? Said something. Not that I know of, sir. His record is spotless. Exemplary, actually. Morrison made a decision. Fine, grant the request. But I want a word with Harding first. Tonight. An hour later, James stood in the captain's office, his heart pounding. This was it. Someone had seen him enter the princess's room. He was about to lose everything. Officer Harding, Morrison began, his voice unreadable. Princess Catherine has requested your presence at tomorrow's ceremony. Inside the hall. Would you care to explain why? James kept his face neutral. No, sir. I cannot explain it. Cannot. Or will not. Cannot, sir? Morrison studied him for a long moment. James could feel sweat forming on his back, despite his rigid posture. Then the captain did something unexpected. He smiled. Just slightly. My father served in the Royal Guard, Morrison said quietly. 40 years ago. Did you know that? No, sir. There was a day, early in his career, when Princess Anne, the king's sister, was in distress. My father broke protocol. Spoke to her without being addressed. Offered her a handkerchief. Simple gesture. Small thing, but she never forgot it. Morrison leaned back in his chair. 20 years later, when my father was dying of heart disease, she visited him. In the hospital. A princess, visiting a retired guard. She held his hand and thanked him for seeing her as a human being on the worst day of her life. James's throat tightened. He understood what the captain was saying without saying it. Protocol exists for a reason, Harding. It keeps order, maintains boundaries, protects everyone involved, but... Morrison paused. Sometimes, humanity matters more than protocol. Sometimes kindness is the highest duty. Yes, sir. You'll be stationed inside tomorrow. East side of the hall. 3rd row. You'll maintain your position throughout the ceremony. Standard protocol? Understood? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As James turned to leave, Morrison spoke again. Harding, whatever you did, whatever you said, it mattered. Don't think it didn't. That night, James lay in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Emma, about his mother, about all the people in his life who had shown him that rules, while important, were never more important than compassion. He thought about the princess alone in her grief, forced to smile for the world when her world had shattered, and he thought about tomorrow. About standing in that hall, knowing that one person in that vast crowd of dignitaries and officials would be looking for him, needing him to be there. The morning of the ceremony arrived cold and gray. James put on his dress uniform with extra care. Every button perfect. Every crease sharp. If today went wrong, if anyone questioned why he was there, his appearance would be beyond reproach. The ceremony hall was magnificent. Vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows, gold trim on everything. Hundreds of people filed in, diplomats, politicians, members of other royal families, all dressed in black, all wearing practiced expressions of sympathy. James took his position on the east side, third row, as instructed. From here, he had a clear view of the main aisle and the front of the hall where the royal family would sit. The organ began to play. Low, mournful notes that seemed to make the very air heavy. People stood as the royal family entered, and there she was, Princess Catherine, walking slowly, her head high, her face composed. She wore a black dress, simple and elegant. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except for a small brooch. James recognized it immediately. It had belonged to the person she lost. She was carrying them with her, the only way she could. Catherine's eyes swept the room as she walked. Hundreds of faces, all looking at her with pity, with curiosity, with judgment. James could see her breathing carefully, deliberately, holding herself together by sheer will. Then her eyes found him. For just a second, her careful composure flickered. Her step faltered. But then something changed in her expression. Her shoulders straightened just a little more. Her chin lifted. She gave the smallest nod, so subtle that only someone watching closely would notice. James nodded back. Equally subtle. A silent message. You can do this. I'm here. The ceremony was brutal. Speeches about loss and legacy. Music that seemed designed to break hearts. Readings from poetry that spoke of grief and love and saying goodbye. James watched Catherine throughout. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. Once, during a particularly difficult moment, her eyes closed briefly. James could see her fighting tears, winning. But at what cost? Midway through, there was a video presentation. Images of the person they had lost, smiling, laughing, embracing Catherine, and photographs from her childhood. The room filled with quiet sobs. Catherine stared straight ahead. Her jaw was tight. Her knuckles white where her hands gripped each other. She was holding on by a thread. The video ended. The lights came back up. Catherine took a deep, shaking breath. That's when it happened. James did something that made every guard in the room freeze in shock. Something that violated every rule, every protocol, every tradition. He smiled at her, not a broad smile, not a grin, just the smallest, gentlest curve of his lips, and he mouthed two words, so small only she could possibly see them. You're okay? Catherine's eyes locked on his. For 3 heartbeats, 4, 5, they just looked at each other across the crowded room. A guard and a princess. 2 people who understood what it meant to carry unbearable weight. And then, impossibly, Catherine smiled back. It was tiny. A ghost of a smile. But it was real. Not the practiced royal smile. Not the performance for cameras. A genuine moment of human connection in the middle of manufactured ceremony. Several people noticed. Heads turned. Whispers started. Who was she smiling at? Why? This wasn't appropriate. This wasn't the tone, but Catherine didn't care. For just that moment, she let herself feel something other than crushing grief. Gratitude, connection, hope that maybe, eventually, she would be okay. The ceremony continued. More speeches. More tears from the crowd. But Catherine made it through. Every minute. Every second. And every time it got too hard, she would glance toward the east side of the hall. Toward James, and he would be there, steady as stone. Silently reminding her that she was stronger than she knew. When it finally ended, when people began to file out, Catherine stood with her family. She was required to stand at the exit, to receive condolences personally from hundreds of people. A receiving line that would last hours. James watched as person after person approached her, shaking her hand, offering practiced words of sympathy. He saw her nod, smile weakly, thank them. Over and over. A performance of grace when she had nothing left to give. 2 hours in, James noticed her swaying slightly. The toll of the day, the grief, the stress of holding everything in, it was breaking her down physically. He caught the eye of Lieutenant Peters, who was coordinating the guard positions. James gave a subtle signal. Medical concern. Peters nodded and discreetly spoke into his radio. Within minutes, the princess's private secretary approached her, whispered something. Catherine nodded gratefully. An announcement was made. The princess needed a brief break for her health. The receiving line would resume in 15 minutes. Catherine was escorted to a private room just off the main hall. James knew he should stay at his post, but he also knew she was alone in there, probably collapsing now that no one could see. He made a decision. Again, he left his position and walked to the private room. 2 guards stood outside. They looked at him with confusion. Captain Morrison's orders, James lied smoothly. Additional security for Her Highness during the break. Accepted it without question. James was a familiar face, a trusted colleague. They stepped aside. James knocked softly on the door. Then he opened it. Catherine was sitting on a small couch, her head in her hands. When she heard the door, she looked up quickly, wiping her eyes, preparing to put the mask back on. Then she saw it was James. Her whole body sagged with relief. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't go back out there. I can't shake another hand and hear another person tell me they're sorry. I can't. James closed the door behind him. He stayed standing, maintaining some semblance of protocol even now. Yes, you can, he said gently. I can't. There's nothing left. You made it through the ceremony. The hardest part is over. The hardest part was watching that video and not screaming. The hardest part was sitting 3 feet from their empty chair. The hardest part was pretending any of this matters when they're gone. Her voice broke. How many more hands do I have to shake? How many more times do I have to say thank you for sympathy? I don't want. James thought for a moment. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small coin. A simple quarter? You see this? He held it up. Catherine looked at him like he'd lost his mind. It's a coin. When I was struggling after Emma died, my therapist gave me one of these. Told me that on the hardest days, when I felt like I couldn't take another step, I should hold it in my pocket. And every hour I made it through, every difficult moment I survived, I should move the coin from one pocket to the other. I don't understand. It's a reminder that you're surviving, that you're making it through, 1 moment at a time, 1 hour at a time. He stepped forward and placed the coin in her hand. You have maybe 90 more people to greet, 90 more handshakes. Every 10 people move this coin. Feel it in your hand. Remember that you're doing the impossible, and that you're not alone. Catherine closed her fingers around the coin. It was warm from being in James's pocket. Solid, real, something to focus on besides. The crushing weight of grief and obligation. What if I break down out there? She asked quietly. Then you break down, and the world will see that you're human, and the people who matter will love you more for it, not less. She looked up at him. This guard who had risked everything twice now just to help her through the darkest days of her life. Why are you so kind to me? She asked. James smiled sadly. Because someone was kind to me when I needed it most. And because kindness is free, Your Highness. It costs nothing to care, but it can save a life. Catherine stood. She straightened her dress, took a deep breath. The coin was clutched tightly in her left hand. Thank you, James. I mean it. Truly, I know you do. She walked to the door, then paused. Without turning around, she said something that would stay with James forever. When this is over, when enough time has passed that I can smile again without feeling guilty, I'm going to do something good, something that matters. in their memory, and you're going to help me plan it, because you understand what it means to turn grief into purpose." Before James could respond, she opened the door and walked back out into the hall. Back into her role, back into the performance. But she wasn't the same person who had entered that room 15 minutes ago. She was carrying a coin in her pocket, and with it, a reminder that someone saw her, someone cared. Someone believed she was strong enough to survive this. James watched from his position as she returned to the receiving line. He saw her shake hands, smile softly, accept condolences with grace. In every 10 people or so, he saw her hand move to her pocket, touching the coin, moving it. Counting her survival in small increments, she made it through all 90 people. Every single one. When the last guest left, when the hall finally emptied, Catherine stood for a moment in the silence. Then she turned and looked directly at James. Across the now empty hall, their eyes met one final time. She didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't need to. She simply placed her hand over her heart, a gesture of gratitude deeper than words. James bowed his head in acknowledgement. 3 months later, Princess Catherine announced a new initiative, a mental health program for young people dealing with grief and loss. A program that would provide counseling, support groups, and resources to those navigating the darkest valleys of sorrow. At the announcement, she wore the same brooch she had worn at the ceremony, and she spoke openly about grief, about loss, about the importance of being honest about pain instead of hiding it behind. Perfect smiles. The program's name was chosen carefully, chosen to honor both the person she lost and the lesson she learned. It was called the Coin Project, a reminder that survival happens one moment at a time, one moved coin at a time. James watched the announcement on television from his small apartment. When Catherine mentioned the name, when she spoke about a random act of kindness from an unexpected source changing her perspective, he smiled. His phone rang 10 minutes later, a palace number he didn't recognize. "Officer Harding? This is the princess's private secretary. Her Highness requests your presence tomorrow at 2 o'clock. She has a proposal she'd like to discuss with you regarding your role in her new initiative." James agreed, of course. And the next day, sitting in a palace room far less formal than their first meeting, Catherine outlined her vision, a program that would save lives. And she wanted him to be part of it. "You broke every rule for me," she said. "You risked everything to show me kindness when I needed it most. Now I want to take that kindness and multiply it. I want to help thousands of people the way you helped me, Your Highness," James began, but she held up her hand. "Catherine, when we're working together on this, please call me Catherine." It was the beginning of something neither of them expected. A partnership built on shared grief, unexpected kindness, and the understanding that sometimes the most important thing you can do is see someone's pain and not look away years later. When James was asked why he did it, why he broke protocol that rainy afternoon, his answer was always the same: because rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. And that day, someone needed to be seen more than I needed to follow rules. It was as simple and as complicated as that. Princess Catherine's charity went on to help over 50,000 young people navigate grief and loss. And at the center of every support group, every counseling session, every moment of connection was a simple coin. A reminder that you survive one moment at a time, one breath at a time, one moved coin at a time. And it all started because one guard decided that compassion mattered more than protocol. That kindness was worth the risk. That seeing someone's pain and doing something about it was the most important duty of all.